Change. It sounds a bit like a political manifesto. And I'm sure that as we approach a general election in Britain, all the politicians will be trying to persuade us how they can change things for the better. History shows they do not always succeed, and many good changes come about despite political intent. It's often the determination of the human spirit that bring many good changes and create perhaps a better world. That is what I want to emphasize, and I would like to refer to some of the surprising changes I've seen in my own lifetime. My parents were born in 1897, when Queen Victoria was still on the throne, and the pound was a real gold coin known as a sovereign. My father died in 1970, the year before the introduction of decimal currency. I was born just before the Second World War. One of my earliest memories is my father's look of great concern as he heard Prime Minister Chamberlain's voice on the radio announcing, "And consequently, we are at war with Germany." My own family's poverty in the years of the Great Depression and the experience of that war have influenced my life's view of what changes are most important. These great issues can be best summarized as social justice and peace, and are very much interlinked. Regardless of our political colour, there can be no greater causes. These are worldwide influences which ultimately affect everyday life, wherever we find ourselves. However, in this talk, I want to focus on my own experience, particularly with voluntary work and my own community in Cardiff. My generation was the first to benefit from changes that brought significant economic benefits to ordinary people. For example, when I finished school, the Youth Employment Office was able immediately to give me 6 possible employers. But the very first I went to, it was "Start on Monday," which would have been the case almost anywhere. Unfortunately, world influences such as the Middle East Yom Kippur War of 1973 contributed to the oil crisis with the 70% increase in the price of oil. This brought increased unemployment from what was a few thousands in the 1950s to a record 3 million in 1986, when, incidentally, with many others, I was made redundant from the Glamorgan County Council. The government response to high unemployment was varied and included economic incentives to businesses with schemes for job creation and training. In 1975, Voluntary Community Service established its volunteer job shop, and with a job shop which then developed to include 6 job creation workers funded by the Manpower Services Commission. Many similar voluntary bodies cooperated in job creation schemes. which, while being a short-term help to individuals, really provided long-term economic benefits. But it grew, and one time VCS was supervising 14 staff, which were people working on various projects. And this was an unreasonable demand for a committee which was itself composed mainly of inexperienced volunteers. Nevertheless, one of the most positive developments was the social education project, which included training conferences like the one in 1978 for 50 school leavers. A big change has come about in the wider outlook for employment. From what was a job for life, one must now adapt to change and respond to different kinds of job opportunities. Strange to say, voluntary work, although hopefully still altruistic, is also seen as being practical experience to add to one's CV. It might be a satisfying way to occupy oneself constructively while still seeking paid work. Although there's been a decline in unemployment, it's still a major problem, a social problem, especially for the young. At the end of last year, there were 740,000 16 to 24-year-olds unemployed. I've recently seen Pride, a film with a humorous slant about a real event during the miners' strike, which began this month, March, in 1984. But in reality, it was anything but funny and turned out to be a 12-month-long bitter dispute, the worst since the general strike of 1926. 20 pits were closed, making 20,000 redundant suddenly. Whatever the rights or wrongs, it added to already high unemployment. It destroyed communities, particularly in the South Wales valleys. However, it did demonstrate how in the most adverse of circumstances, ordinary folk could help each other. This is a spirit that does not change with time, and something we might remind ourselves of when we face today's difficulties. An aspect of this self-help spirit is what brought voluntary community service into being in 1964. The first practical activity was involved with young volunteers helping the elderly and handicapped with odd jobs such as gardening and decorating. This pioneered work, which is a need still unchanged, but now so much more efficiently organised, for example, with Age Cymru's scheme, Handy Van. It's definitely the case that so many practical things have improved over the years, but there always remains the need for human interaction and sympathy. The big change in the near future for this kind of community work may be in attitudes. Although we should still, of course, show our concern for one another, we should cultivate a stronger realization of how we need each other, and that everyone, yes, everyone, can take part. It otherwise seems a bit one way, like those early schemes of the young helping the old. But the old also need to be inspired to be volunteers. So the Cardiff Council 50 plus forums is a change to be greatly welcomed. There are now more than 11 million over 65 in Britain, even 3 million my age and over. We should applaud the fact that in the last 50 years, life expectancy has increased by 10 mainly healthy years, with more than an extra 20 during a century. 76% of older people believe that the country fails to make use of the skills and talents of older people. We are not just aged, but age-rich. Thus, I hope I can help spread this message to encourage one very important change that can be beneficial to us all.